The gleaming superstructure of Oral Station hung suspended in the inky void, a testament to engineering brilliance against Harael's vermilion backdrop. Through the bustling promenade of the station, Admiral Kellen Thorne moved with purpose, his weathered face set in concentration as he surveyed the interspecies bazaar. The Terra Nova's mission was simple: establish diplomatic relations with the Arzon civilization and secure safe passage through the Aurelian system. "First time seeing Arzon up close, Admiral?" Lieutenant Li Wei asked, her compact frame alert as she scanned the crowd. "First time seeing so many in one place," Kellen admitted, adjusting the collar of his Interstellar Concord uniform. At 33, he'd already witnessed humanity's tentative first steps into the galactic community. But the Arzon remained enigmatic despite 3 years of contact. The station's artificial gravity pulled slightly stronger than Earth standard, lending a heaviness to each step. Neon advertisements in multiple languages bathed the marketplace in prismatic light, reflecting off polished metal surfaces. Merchants hawked wares from a dozen worlds, while maintenance drones hummed overhead, their sensors blinking rhythmically. "Remember the briefing," Kellen cautioned his team. "The Arzon society is stratified: royal, bloodline, and commoners. We address the royals with utmost respect or risk diplomatic incident." Vice Admiral Mara Delgado nodded, her dark eyes taking in the alien architecture. "The governess expects us at 1900 hours. That gives us time to—" A commotion erupted near a side corridor. The crowd parted as a slender figure darted through, pale blue skin glistening with perspiration. Kellen's trained eye immediately registered the silvery white hair and ornate clothing that marked Arzon royalty. The female Arzon moved with desperation, cerulean eyes scanning faces until they locked with Kellen's. Something in that gaze, terror mixed with determination, made him straighten. Behind her, armed Arzon in crimson armor pushed through the throng, weapons drawn. She approached an Arzon soldier standing nearby, whispering urgently, but he recoiled as if burned. The panic in her movements intensified as she spun, searching. Then she was before Kellen, close enough that he could see the intricate pattern of barely visible veins beneath her skin, like rivers of quicksilver. "Human?" she gasped, her universal translator rendering perfect English with an ethereal quality. "I beg sanctuary. They'll kill me within moments." Lee's hand moved to her sidearm. "Admiral?" "Who are you?" Kellen asked, aware they were drawing attention. "Princess Nyrus Arzon," she whispered, eyes darting to the approaching guards. "Daughter to the Emperor. Please, they hunt me for my bloodline." Kellen hesitated only a heartbeat. The Concord's prime directive was clear: non-interference in the internal affairs of sovereign civilizations. Yet something in her desperate plea resonated with his core beliefs. "Behind me," he said quietly. "Lieutenant, casual formation. We're returning to the ship." The pursuing Arzon guards halted abruptly as a commanding female voice boomed through the station's communication system. "Citizens of Oral Station, this is Governess Marathi speaking." The voice dripped with authority. "Princess Nyrus has betrayed our sacred traditions and triggered the bloodline curse. Any being harboring her will be executed without trial. She must be apprehended immediately." Through the crowd, Kellen glimpsed a striking Arzon female on a nearby screen, adorned in ceremonial armor of deep crimson and obsidian. Her expression was carved from ice, but her eyes burned with intensity. "That's my mother," Nyrus whispered, trembling. "The governess. She'll destroy anyone who helps me." Kellen's jaw tightened. "Vice Admiral Delgado, inform the shuttle we're leaving immediately. Lieutenant Lee, secure our exit path." "Admiral," Mara protested quietly, "Concord regulations strictly prohibit—" "I'm aware of regulations," Kellen cut her off. "But I'm not leaving anyone to be executed without trial, royal or otherwise. We'll sort the politics later." As they moved toward the docking bay, Kellen felt the weight of his decision settling across his shoulders. In protecting one life, he might have endangered his crew, his mission, and relations between humanity and the Arzan. Yet watching Nyrus's fearful glances, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The hunt had begun. "Admiral Thorne, this is madness," Vice Admiral Delgado hissed as they rushed through maintenance corridors. "You've potentially jeopardized Earth's standing with the entire Aurelian system." Kellen kept his voice low. "Noted, Mara. But we've sworn to uphold certain principles beyond political convenience." Nyrus moved silently between them, her silver-white hair partially concealed beneath the technician's hood. The princess had barely spoken since they'd left the main promenade, her luminous eyes constantly scanning for threats. "The maintenance shaft leads directly to our docking bay," Lee reported, checking her tactical display. "But station security is on high alert. They're scanning all departing vessels." Kellen nodded grimly. "Then we need a diversion." They paused at a junction where service tunnels branched in 3 directions. Recycled air whistled through ventilation ducts, carrying the scent of machine oil and ozone. "Why?" Mara asked suddenly, turning to Nyrus. "Why is the governess, your own mother, hunting you?" The princess's shoulders tensed. When she spoke, her voice carried centuries of fatalism. "The royal bloodline of Arzan bears an ancient curse," she explained. "Any royal who violates the divine edict faces death. Her voice faltered. "I accidentally touched the ancestral relic during a ceremony. The curse activates if the bloodline is impure." "That's barbaric," Lee muttered. "It's our tradition," Nyrus replied, a flash of pride breaking through her fear. "The purity of our lineage maintains the prosperity of our civilization." Kellen studied her. "And you believe this curse is real?" Nyrus met his gaze unflinchingly. "I've witnessed it consume others who transgressed. The veins turn black, spreading until—" she shuddered. "Until nothing remains but ash." The terminal at the junction suddenly flashed red. Lee moved quickly, fingers dancing across the interface. "They've locked down all civilian transport," she reported. "And they're broadcasting your image. Admiral, they know you're harboring the princess." "Options," Kellen demanded. "Cargo Bay 12, Mara suggested. The artesian mineral shipment leaves in 20 minutes. If we can hide aboard." "Too risky," Kellen countered. "We make for the Terra Nova. Once aboard, we can initiate emergency protocols." A distant clanging echoed through the corridor, the sound of armored footsteps. "They're coming," Nyrus whispered, pressing herself against the wall. "Human, if you leave me here, I die. My bloodline ends." Something in her voice, not just fear, but a profound sadness, struck Kellen. He thought of Earth's history, of persecutions based on bloodlines and heritage. How many had begged similar sanctuary across the centuries? "No one gets left behind," he said firmly. "That's how humans operate, or at least, how we should." They moved through the narrowing maintenance tunnel, emerging into a dimly lit cargo hold. Massive containers towered around them, destined for worlds throughout the conquered. "Admiral," Lee warned, "security drones ahead." Kellen gestured for silence as hovering security orbs drifted past, their sensors sweeping methodically. When they'd passed, he turned to Mara. "Vice Admiral, I need you to create a distraction in the station's environmental systems. Nothing dangerous, just enough to draw attention." Mara's expression was conflicted, but she nodded. "I'll trigger a Level 2 diagnostic cycle in this sector. It should create sufficient alerts to divert some security." "Lieutenant Lee, you'll accompany the princess and me to Docking Bay 7. We'll board through the emergency access hatch." Nyrus suddenly gripped Kellen's arm, her fingers surprisingly strong. "The hunters," she whispered urgently. "They're not just guards, they're shadow walkers, elite killers trained to track royalty who flee." "How would they find us in this labyrinth?" Lee asked. Nyrus touched her temple. "The royal bloodline has certain abilities. Telepathic resonance. They can sense my presence if they're close enough. Kellen absorbed this information, recalculating. Then we move faster. Mara, after the distraction. Rendezvous at the ship. The Vice Admiral hesitated. Kellen, if this goes wrong, then I take full responsibility, he finished. This is my decision alone. As Mara disappeared down a side passage, Kellen felt the weight of command press down. 20 years in the Conquered had taught him that regulations existed for good reasons. Yet sometimes, the gap between rules and righteousness became too wide to ignore. They were nearing the docking bay when alarms blared throughout the station. That's not Mara's distraction, Lee said, checking her communicator. Something bigger. Station-wide announcements echoed in multiple languages. All citizens, remain in designated areas. Arzan Royal Guard has authorized lethal force against any who interfere with their sacred duty. Nairis paled, the blue of her skin taking on an ashen quality. They've invoked blood right, permission to kill anyone in their path. Kellen made a swift decision. Change of plans. We're taking maintenance shaft E-17 directly to the external dock. That's open to space, Lee protested. Precisely why they won't expect it, Kellen replied. Our suits are in the emergency locker near the junction. They had just retrieved the environmental suits when the first energy blast scorched the wall beside them. 3 Arzan warriors in ceremonial armor appeared at the corridor's end, weapons raised. Surrender the princess, the lead warrior demanded. By order of Governess Marathi. Kellen pushed Nairis behind him. She's under the protection of the Interstellar Conquered. There is no protection from the Bloodline curse, the warrior replied. Stand aside, human, or die with her. Lee drew her sidearm in one fluid motion. Admiral? Kellen raised his hand in a peacekeeping gesture. We don't want conflict. This is a misunderstanding that can be resolved through diplomatic channels. The warrior's response was another energy blast that Kellen barely dodged. Into the suits, he commanded, reaching for the emergency panel. As Lee covered them, Kellen and Nairis scrambled into the environmental protection gear. I've never worn human equipment, Nairis said, voice muffled as she struggled with the helmet. Breathe normally, Kellen instructed, helping secure her seals. The suit regulates oxygen automatically. Lee fired several shots, forcing the Arzan warriors to take cover. Hurry, Admiral! Once Lee had donned her suit, Kellen activated the emergency hatch. The warning klaxons blared as air pressure began to drop. Hold on to the safety lines, he ordered as the outer door slid open, revealing the vastness of space. Harael's red surface dominated the view, its swirling dust storms visible even from orbit. The sudden decompression pulled them toward the opening. Magnetic boots activated automatically, anchoring them as they methodically moved through the airlock. Now, they were on the exterior of Oral Station, moving along maintenance handrails toward Docking Bay 7, where the Terra Nova waited. Above them, the infinite darkness of space. Below, the dizzying drop toward Harael's atmosphere. Admiral, Lee's voice came through the suit's communication system. Arzan vessels are undocking. They're searching for us. Kellen glanced back at Nairis, who moved with surprising grace despite her unfamiliarity with the suit. 300 meters to our ship. We can make it. They had covered half the distance when a blinding light illuminated them from above. An Arzan patrol craft hovered nearby, its spotlights fixed on their position. We've been spotted, Lee warned unnecessarily. Kellen activated his emergency communicator. Terra Nova. This is Admiral Thorne. Emergency extraction required at my coordinates. Authentication code, Sierra 9 Echo 3. The response was immediate. Authentication confirmed. Admiral, initiating emergency retrieval. Stand by. The Terra Nova's engines flared to life, the sleek exploration vessel breaking from its docking clamps. Simultaneously, the Arzan patrol craft opened fire, energy bolts sizzling past them. Hold position, Kellen ordered as the Terra Nova maneuvered closer. Its emergency retrieval hatch opened on the underside, extending a magnetic docking tube. "Jump on my mark," Kellen instructed, gripping Nyrus's suited arm. "The magnetic field will guide us in." Lee went first, disconnecting her safety line and leaping into the tube. Her form was pulled smoothly inside the ship. "Now!" Kellen shouted, releasing his own line and pulling Nyrus with him into the void. For 3 terrifying seconds, they floated in space, vulnerable to the patrol craft's weapons. Then the magnetic field caught them, accelerating them into the safety of the Terra Nova. They landed roughly on the deck of the retrieval bay as the hatch sealed behind them. Pressure normalized with a hiss of incoming air. "Emergency space jump," Kellen ordered through his communicator. "Get us away from the station!" The ship lurched as its engines engaged at full power. Through the viewports, Oral Station receded rapidly, the pursuing Arzan vessels growing smaller until they were mere pinpoints of light. Kellen removed his helmet, breathing deeply. Beside him, Nairi struggled with her suit's clasps. He helped her remove the helmet, revealing her face flushed with a deeper blue, the Arzan equivalent of an adrenaline response. "Thank you," she whispered, azure eyes meeting his. "You risked everything." Before Kellen could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Warning alarms blared throughout the vessel. "Admiral to bridge," he barked into his communicator. "Status report." "Arzan vessels firing, sir," came the response. "They've deployed some kind of energy net. Our engines are failing." The deck pitched beneath them as the Terra Nova veered sharply. Emergency lighting activated, bathing the retrieval bay in crimson. "Initiating emergency landing procedures," the ship's AI announced calmly. "All personnel secure for atmospheric entry." Kellen helped Nyrus to a safety harness as Lee secured the loose equipment. Through the viewport, Harael's red surface grew larger, its swirling dust storms now clearly visible. "They're forcing us down," Lee observed grimly. Kellen met Nyrus's fearful gaze. "We'll survive this, I promise." As the Terra Nova plunged toward Harael's unforgiving surface, Kellen wondered if that was a promise he could keep. The Terra Nova's emergency landing systems deployed with seconds to spare, powerful thrusters counteracting their uncontrolled descent. Still, the impact rattled the ship violently, throwing crew members against safety restraints and scattering loose equipment across the deck. When the motion finally ceased, an eerie silence fell, broken only by the hiss of hydraulics and the occasional spark from damaged systems. Kellen unstrapped himself, wincing at a sharp pain in his shoulder. "Status report." Lieutenant Lee was already at a functioning console. "Hull integrity at 87%. Main engines offline. Communications jammed by some kind of Arzan technology." Mara Delgado emerged from an adjacent corridor, a thin line of blood tracking from her forehead. "Engineering took the worst hit. Coolant leak contained. But the jump drive is completely disabled." Kellen moved to the viewport. Outside, Harael's crimson landscape stretched endlessly, rippling dunes broken occasionally by jagged rock formations. The 2 suns hung low on the horizon, casting long, sinister shadows. "Where are we?" he asked. "Approximately 200 kilometers from the Sky Temple of Oral," Lee reported, "deep in the crimson wastes." Nyrus stood silently by the viewport, her silver-white hair glinting in the emergency lighting. Her expression was unreadable, but Kellen noticed how her slender fingers trembled slightly against the glass. "The crimson wastes," she finally spoke. "No Arzan ventures here willingly. The temperature drops to -30 at night, rises to 80 during day peak, and the Lokran." She shuddered visibly. "Lokran?" Mara questioned. "Predatory insectoids," Nyrus explained. "They hunt in swarms, following the electrical signatures of living beings. Their touch causes flesh to dissolve." Kellen turned to his officers. "Mara, I need you to coordinate repairs. Priority on communications and propulsion. Lee, organize security teams. We don't know what's out there." "And me?" Nyrus asked quietly. Kellen considered her. The fugitive princess had caused their current predicament, yet something in her defiant stance compelled respect. "You know this planet better than anyone aboard," he said. "We need that knowledge." A flicker of surprise crossed her features before she nodded. "I'll help however I can." Hours passed as the crew worked to stabilize the ship's systems. The intense heat of Harael's dual suns began to tax the environmental controls, interior temperatures rising steadily despite all efforts. In engineering, Mara directed repairs with quiet efficiency. "The power distribution network is completely scrambled," she reported. Whatever weapon the Arzon used, it was designed to disable rather than destroy. "They want us alive," Kellen surmised. "Or, more specifically, they want Nairis alive." "For execution," Mara added grimly. "Admiral, I respect your humanitarian instincts, but we've placed our entire crew in jeopardy for one alien princess." Kellen met her gaze steadily. "If we abandoned someone to die when we could have helped, what would that make us?" Mara sighed. "Human, I suppose. The question is whether we can afford such principles out here." As dusk approached, the temperature began to plummet rapidly, confirming Nairis's warning. The ship's damaged systems struggled to compensate, forcing the crew to don thermal gear. Kellen found Nairis in the observation deck, staring out at the darkening landscape. The princess had changed into provided human clothing, practical garments that somehow failed to diminish her regal bearing. "You should rest," he said, joining her at the viewport. "Sleep eludes those hunted by their own blood," she replied softly. Then, after a pause, "Why did you help me, Admiral Thorne?" Kellen considered the question. "Where I come from, we believe everyone deserves a fair trial. Being condemned without one offends my sense of justice." "Even when it's not your justice to enforce? Not your world?" Her azure eyes studied him intently. "Justice transcends worlds," he answered simply. A sad smile touched her lips. "A beautiful sentiment. Naive, perhaps, but beautiful." Suddenly, Nairis stiffened, her eyes widening. She pressed her palm against her temple, expression contorting in pain. "What is it?" Kellen moved toward her, concerned. "My father," she whispered. "I can feel him, calling." "Your father, the Emperor?" Nairis nodded, eyes unfocused. "The royal bloodline allows certain connections, telepathic bonds. He's alive. But—" her voice broke. "He's in agony, imprisoned in the Sky Temple." "I thought Governess Marathi was your mother," Kellen said, confused. "She is. But in our culture, the governing partner holds power over the royal consort." Nairis's expression darkened. "My mother has always been ambitious. I feared she might. But to move against the Emperor himself—" She turned to Kellen with renewed urgency. "We must reach the Sky Temple. If my father still lives, there's hope of ending this without further bloodshed." "The ship isn't going anywhere soon," Kellen reminded her. "And the desert between us and the Sky Temple is apparently lethal. Because of me. Your ship is grounded. Your crew endangered." Determination hardened her features. "I won't ask you to risk more lives, but I must try to reach my father." Before Kellen could respond, Lieutenant Lee entered the observation deck. "Admiral, we've detected movement outside. Multiple signatures, converging on our position." The tactical display showed dozens of heat signatures surrounding the ship, moving with disturbing coordination. "Lo Kran," Nairis breathed. "They've found us." Kellen activated the ship-wide communication. "All personnel, secure all external access points. Possible hostile life forms approaching." Through the viewport, they could now see them, massive insectoid creatures with elongated limbs scuttling across the crimson sand. Their carapaces reflected the fading light with an oily sheen, mandibles clicking in anticipation. "They're drawn to our power systems," Nairis explained. "Electrical currents call to them like beacons." Can we repel them? Kellen asked. Lai checked the weapon systems. Defensive perimeter is operational, but using energy weapons might just attract more. A plan began forming in Kellen's mind. If we can't stay here, and we can't fly out, we walk, Nyrus finished, understanding his thoughts. A small team, minimal electrical signatures, moving at night when the Lokran are less active. Kellen nodded slowly. The engineering team stays to repair the ship. A second team heads for the Sky Temple to seek help, or at least answers. Lee frowned. Sir, with respect, that's extremely high risk. Staying here might be higher risk, Kellen countered. If the Arzan find us disabled, or if those creatures breach our hull. The decision crystallized. By morning, they would split their forces. Mara would remain with the engineering crew to repair the Terra Nova, while Kellen would lead a small team, including Nyrus and Lee, toward the distant Sky Temple. That night, as the temperature continued to drop and the Lokran circled their wounded vessel, Kellen found Nyrus again on the observation deck. She stood motionless, eyes closed, fingers pressed to her temples. My father grows weaker, she said without opening her eyes. The connection fades. Kellen approached cautiously. These telepathic abilities, are they common among your people? Only in the royal bloodline, she replied, opening her eyes. Another reason the purity must be maintained. And the curse, what exactly happens? Nyrus's expression grew distant. The ancestors decreed that any royal who violated their sacred laws would have their blood turn against them. The silver veins you see beneath our skin, they blacken, spreading outward until the body simply disintegrates. That sounds more like a biological weapon than a curse, Kellen observed. A flicker of surprise crossed her features. Perhaps our histories blur the line between technology and mysticism. She studied him curiously. Does your species not have similar traditions? Lines that must not be crossed? We've had many such traditions, Kellen admitted. Most of them we've outgrown. And you believe we should outgrow ours? There was no hostility in her question, only genuine curiosity. I believe traditions should serve life, not destroy it, he answered. Neres turned back to the viewport, watching the Lokran circling in the distance. Because of me, you might all die here. I never intended this. Intentions rarely align with outcomes, Kellen said. But we make our choices and face the consequences. And if the consequence is your death, the death of your crew? Kellen considered this. Then we die knowing we tried to save a life rather than abandon it. Neres studied him with those impossibly blue eyes. You humans are strange creatures, Admiral Thorne. So fragile, yet so willing to risk everything for principles. It's not just principle, Kellen replied softly. It's who we are, or who we strive to be. Outside, the Lokran continued their patient vigil, waiting for the wounded ship's defenses to fail. Oh! Dawn broke over the crimson wastes, the twin suns casting harsh light across the rippling dunes. The temperature rose rapidly, transforming the bitter cold of night into scorching heat. Kellen surveyed his team. 6 volunteers, including himself, Neres, and Lieutenant Lee. Each wore desert survival gear modified from the ship's emergency supplies, with cooling units and radiation shields. They carried minimal equipment, water purifiers, emergency rations, basic weapons, and communication devices hopefully beyond the range of the Arzan jammers. The Lokran have retreated with the sunlight, Lee reported, scanning the horizon. But they'll return at dusk. Mara approached, concern etched on her features. We've reinforced the hull breaches and restored auxiliary power. Communications remain jammed, but we're working on bypassing the interference. Good. Continue repairs, Kellen instructed. If you re-establish contact with the Conquered, inform them of our situation, but emphasize that we're seeking diplomatic resolution. Mara nodded, then lowered her voice. Kellen, This mission, the odds aren't good. When are they ever? He replied with a half smile. Just, Mara hesitated. Come back, Admiral. The crew needs you. The journey began under the punishing glare of Harael's suns. The terrain proved treacherous, shifting sands concealing sudden drops, razor-sharp rock formations erupting from the desert floor, and occasional electromagnetic disturbances that disrupted their equipment. Nerys moved with surprising stamina, despite the hostile environment. The royal bloodline grants certain physical adaptations, she explained, when Kellen commented on her endurance. We evolved on this world, after all. By midday, the heat had become nearly unbearable. The team sheltered beneath an overhanging rock formation, conserving water and energy. 200 kilometers at this pace will take days, Lee observed, studying their mapping system. And we'll need to find shelter each night when the Lokran emerge. Nerys closed her eyes, fingertips pressed to her temples, a gesture Kellen now recognized as her attempting telepathic connection. My father's presence grows stronger, she said finally, but also different, fractured. I fear what they might be doing to him. Who is they? Kellen asked. Just your mother, or others. The governess has allies, nobles who benefit from the old ways. Nerys's expression darkened. They call themselves tradition keepers. They would rather see the royal line end than change. As they prepared to resume their journey, a distant rumbling drew their attention. On the horizon, a massive wall of swirling crimson dust approached rapidly. Sandstorm, one of the security officers warned. Not just sand, Nerys corrected, her expression grim. Electrostatic storm. The particles carry electrical charge that can short-circuit equipment, or living nervous systems. They had barely gathered their gear when the storm hit, engulfing them in howling, stinging chaos. Visibility dropped to zero as crimson particles filled the air, charged with crackling energy that raised the hair on their arms. "Form a chain!" Kellen shouted above the roar. "Don't lose contact!" They linked arms, Kellen at the front with Nerys beside him. Through the swirling maelstrom, he felt her grip tighten as a particularly violent surge of electricity arced overhead. "This way," she called, tugging him leftward. "I sense a cave system." Trusting her instinct, Kellen allowed Nerys to guide them through the blinding storm. After what seemed an eternity of stumbling through electrically charged sand, they staggered into the relative shelter of a narrow cavern. As the team collapsed against the stone walls, catching their breath, Kellen took inventory. Everyone had made it, exhausted, coated in crimson dust, but alive. "How did you know this was here?" he asked Nerys. She hesitated before answering. "There are maps, of a sort, encoded in the royal bloodline. Knowledge passed genetically from one generation to the next. The geography of Harael is part of that inheritance." "Useful trick," Lee commented, brushing red dust from her equipment. Outside, the storm continued to rage, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating the cave entrance with eerie blue light. "We'll need to wait it out," Kellen decided, checking their supplies. "Could be hours." As the team settled in, Nerys moved deeper into the cave, her fingers trailing along strange markings etched into the stone walls. "These are ancient," she murmured when Kellen joined her. "Before the Sky Temple, before the curse, our earliest ancestors sheltered in caves like these." Kellen studied the crude pictographs, humanoid figures with elongated limbs, celestial symbols, and what appeared to be ritual scenes. "Your people have been here a long time," he observed. "Longer than your civilization has existed," Nerys confirmed. "We reached the stars, then retreated. The bloodline curse came later, after the Great Retraction." "What caused the retraction?" Nerys's expression grew troubled. "The histories say our ancestors encountered something in deep space, something that followed them home. The curse was supposedly protection against its return." Before Kellen could inquire further, Lieutenant Lee approached urgently. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission, cutting through the jamming. The communication device crackled with static before a familiar voice emerged. Mara Delgado's. Repeat. Arzon forces. Discovered our position. Attacking. Cannot hold. The transmission cut off abruptly. We need to go back, Lee said immediately. Kellen's mind raced through scenarios. None favorable. The storm makes return impossible, and by the time we could reach them, the unspoken reality hung heavily in the air. They might already be too late. Nyra stood apart, conflict evident in her posture. This is my fault, she whispered. All of it. No, Kellen said firmly. The responsibility is mine. I made the decision to help you. Why? Her voice cracked with emotion. Why risk everything for someone you don't even know? Someone not even of your species? Kellen considered her question carefully. Because principles only matter when they're difficult to uphold. Because every sentient being deserves dignity. Because abandoning you would have meant abandoning part of our humanity. Tears, silvery against her blue skin, gathered in Nyris's eyes. If we cannot help your crew, then we must succeed in reaching the Sky Temple. Their sacrifice must have meaning. The storm eventually subsided, revealing a transformed landscape. Dunes shifted, rock formations exposed or buried. As they emerged from the cave, the twin suns were setting, casting long shadows across the crimson desert. We travel through the night, Kellen decided. The Lokran are a risk, but we'll maintain vigilance. They had covered perhaps 10 kilometers when they crested a dune and froze at the sight before them. In the valley below, illuminated by the 3 moons of Harael, dozens of Lokran gathered around something partially buried in the sand. Even from a distance, Kellen recognized the gleaming hull plating of a conquered vessel, a shuttle from the Terra Nova. Survivors, Lee whispered, raising her binoculars. Movement inside the shuttle. Through his own optics, Kellen confirmed. The shuttle's emergency lights still functioned, and shadowy figures moved within. The Lokran circled patiently, occasionally testing the hull with their corrosive touch. We have to help them, one of the security officers urged. Approaching that many Lokran directly would be suicide, Lee countered. Nyra studied the scene intently. The Lokran hunt by sensing electrical currents. If we could create a stronger lure. Draw them away from the shuttle, Kellen nodded, understanding. We'd need a significant power source. Our cooling units, Lee suggested, reconfigured to emit a stronger signature. The plan came together quickly. 2 cooling units were modified into electrical lures, set to activate sequentially at different locations away from the shuttle. Meanwhile, Kellen would lead a small team to extract the survivors, while Lee provided covering fire if necessary. Under the alien moons, they moved into position. The first lure activated with a high-pitched whine, immediately drawing the attention of the Lokran. The insectoid creatures scuttled toward the signal, mandibles clicking in anticipation. Now, Kellen whispered, leading his team down the dune toward the shuttle. They had almost reached the vessel when a piercing screech cut through the night. One of the Lokran had detected them, alerting the others. The swarm divided, some continuing toward the lure while others turned back toward the humans. Run, Kellen ordered, abandoning stealth for speed. They sprinted the final distance as the second lure activated, creating momentary confusion among the Lokran. Reaching the shuttle, Kellen pounded on the hatch. Terra Nova personnel, open up! The hatch slid open, revealing 3 crew members, including Mara Delgado, her face streaked with blood and soot. Admiral, she gasped. We thought... Explanations later. Kellen cut her off, ushering his team inside as the Lokran approached. Can this shuttle fly? Mara shook her head. Crash landed after escaping the ship. Engines are destroyed. Through the viewport, they watched the Lokran surround the shuttle once more, their numbers now augmented by those returning from investigating the lures. What happened at the ship? Kellen asked quietly. Mara's expression hardened. Our Zon forces found us shortly after you left. We had no warning. They disabled our defenses and boarded. Most of the crew..." She couldn't finish. Nyrus stood silently by the viewport, watching the Lokran. When she turned, her face was set with grim determination. "I can draw them away," she said. "The royal bloodline generates a unique electrical signature, stronger than your devices. If I leave the shuttle, they'll follow me." "Absolutely not," Kellen replied immediately. "It makes tactical sense," she insisted. "One life instead of many." "Nobody sacrifices themselves on my watch," Kellen stated firmly. "We find another way." But as the night wore on, and the Lokran continued their siege, options dwindled. The shuttle's power reserves approached critical levels, and with them, the environmental systems that kept the corrosive creatures at bay. Near dawn, Nyrus approached Kellen where he sat reviewing their dwindling options. "Admiral Thorne," she said formally, "I request permission to attempt communication with the Lokran." Kellen looked up in surprise. "Communicate? You said they were mindless predators." "Not mindless," she corrected. "Alien. Different. But in the ancient pictographs, there were symbols suggesting our ancestors once had a relationship with them." "What kind of relationship?" "Symbiotic. Perhaps before the Sky Temples. Before we retreated from the surface." She hesitated. "It's a desperate gamble, but—" "But we're running out of alternatives," Kellen finished. He studied her determined expression. "What do you need?" "To go outside, alone, and access to the shuttle's external speakers." Against the protests of his team, Kellen agreed. As the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, Nyrus stood at the shuttle hatch, preparing to exit. "If this doesn't work," she said quietly, "tell my father, if you ever reach him, that I tried to make things right." Kellen nodded solemnly. "Good luck, Princess." Nyrus stepped outside, moving a short distance from the shuttle. The Lokran immediately detected her presence, their elongated limbs carrying them rapidly in her direction. Through the external speakers, a strange, ululating cry emerged. Nyrus's voice transformed into something ancient and otherworldly. The sound pulsed and shifted, containing patterns that seemed to resonate with the very sand beneath their feet. The Lokran stopped. For an agonizing moment, they remained motionless, mandibles clicking rapidly. Then, to the astonishment of those watching from the shuttle, the creatures began to retreat, disappearing into the crevices and shadows of the desert floor. When the last had vanished, Kellen rushed outside to where Nyrus stood, swaying with exhaustion. "How?" he asked, supporting her as she stumbled. "The song is encoded in our genetics," she whispered. "Like the maps. Knowledge we've forgotten consciously, but still carry in our blood." As the suns rose higher, they assessed their situation. The shuttle was irreparable, but with the Lokran gone, they could salvage supplies for the continued journey to the Sky Temple. "The Arzon forces will be searching for us," Mara warned, as they prepared to depart. "And they'll have air support." "Then we stay off the open desert," Kellen decided. "Nyrus, do your genetic maps include underground passages?" The princess nodded. "Ancient aqueducts run beneath the surface, all the way to the foundation pillars of the Sky Temple. Our ancestors built them before ascending to the clouds." With renewed determination, the expanded group set forth across the crimson wastes. Their destination loomed in the distance, a shimmering mirage against the horizon, where massive energy columns supported a floating city among the clouds. The Sky Temple of Oral awaited, and with it, answers that might save or condemn them all. The ancient aqueducts of Harael stretched beneath the crimson wastes, like the veins of a forgotten giant. Cool air whispered through the tunnels, a blessed relief from the scorching heat above. Luminescent fungi clung to the curved walls, casting an ethereal blue glow that reminded Kellen of Nyrus's skin. "These tunnels predate the Sky Temple by millennia," Nyrus explained, as she led them deeper into the labyrinth. When my ancestors abandoned the surface, they left these waterways to run dry. Why leave the surface at all? Mara asked, her voice echoing slightly. Nerys's expression grew distant. The histories speak of a great cataclysm. Whether natural or self-inflicted is debated. The surface became hostile, and the survivors built the first Sky Temple as refuge. Their expanded group moved steadily through the winding passages. Besides Kellen, Nerys, Lee, and Mara, 4 other crew members had survived: 2 engineers, a medical officer, and a security specialist. They were battered but resolute, driven by the need to honor their fallen comrades. How much farther to the Sky Temple? Kellen asked, after they had traveled for several hours. The energy columns that support the temple should be directly above us, within another day's journey. Nerys replied. From there, we can access the maintenance shafts that run within the columns themselves. As they paused to rest, Kellen noticed Nerys pressing her fingers to her temples, that now familiar gesture indicating she was attempting telepathic contact. My father's presence grows stronger, she said, opening her eyes, but also stranger, as if his thoughts are no longer entirely his own. Could it be the distance or interference? Kellen suggested. Nerys shook her head. Something is wrong. I fear what my mother might have done to him. They continued onward, the tunnels occasionally opening into vast underground chambers where ancient machinery lay dormant. In one such chamber, massive pumps stood silent, their purposes long forgotten. Remarkable engineering, Mara commented, running her hand along one curved surface. These alloys, I've never seen anything like them. Our ancestors were master metallurgists, Nerys said with a hint of pride. Many of their secrets were lost during the ascension. As they explored the chamber, Lieutenant Lee approached Kellen privately. Admiral, a word? They moved slightly apart from the others. Lee's expression was troubled. Sir, I've been monitoring our communications equipment. The jamming is gone. Kellen frowned. That should be good news. Except there's still no signal from the Conquered, Lee continued. And more concerning, no Arzon security chatter either. It's as if they're no longer searching for us, Kellen finished. Or they know exactly where we are and don't need to communicate. A chill ran through him despite the comfortable temperature. Double the watch rotation, and have everyone check their weapons. That night, as the team rested in the ancient chamber, Kellen found Nerys sitting alone beside one of the dormant pumps, her silver-white hair luminescent in the fungal glow. You should rest, he said, sitting beside her. Sleep brings dreams, she replied softly. Dreams of my father calling for help, of my mother's face twisted with hatred. She turned to him. Do humans dream, Admiral? We do, not always pleasantly. Nerys studied him curiously. What do you dream of? Kellen considered the question. Lately, Earth's oceans. I grew up near the sea, endless blue water stretching to the horizon. Water covering the surface, Nerys mused. Harial was once similar, the histories say, before the cataclysm dried the seas and turned them to these endless deserts. Is that why your people value bloodlines so deeply? Fear of another cataclysm? Nerys nodded slowly. The bloodline curse was supposedly created to prevent genetic deviation that might trigger another disaster. But over generations, its purpose became corrupted, a tool for political control rather than protection. And you violated this curse accidentally? I was curious, she admitted. During the renewal ceremony, I touched the ancestral relic, a device said to monitor the purity of royal blood. It responded, strangely to me. My mother declared I had triggered the curse and must be purged. But you don't believe you actually activated the curse? Nerys hesitated. I don't know. The royal veins haven't blackened as tradition says they should. Yet my mother was so certain. A distant sound interrupted their conversation, a faint metallic scraping that echoed through the tunnels. "Did you hear that?" Kellen whispered, instantly alert. Nyrus nodded, eyes wide. "We're not alone." They woke the others silently, gathering their equipment with practiced efficiency. The sound came again, closer now. Unmistakably the movement of something large through the tunnels. "Could be Lokran," Lee suggested, weapon ready. "Underground? Never." Nyrus shook her head. "They avoid enclosed spaces." "Then what?" Mara asked. The answer emerged from a side tunnel. A hulking, mechanical construct with multiple articulated limbs. Its central body housed what appeared to be ancient Arzan technology, but modified with newer components. "Maintenance drone," Nyrus whispered. "Ancient models that tend the aqueducts. But they should be dormant." The drone paused, sensors sweeping the chamber. When it detected their presence, lights along its carapace flashed from blue to crimson. "It's scanning us," Lee warned, raising her weapon. "Wait!" Nyrus moved forward, hands raised. "These drones respond to royal bloodline signatures." She approached the machine cautiously, speaking in the musical Arzan language. The drone's lights flickered, processes clearly conflicted as it assessed her. For a tense moment, Kellen thought the gambit had failed. Then, slowly, the lights returned to blue. The drone retracted several of its limbs and settled into a passive stance. "It recognizes me," Nyrus explained with visible relief. "But it's been reprogrammed to alert the Sky Temple of any royal signatures detected in the tunnels." "Can you countermand that programming?" Kellen asked. Nyrus studied the machine thoughtfully. "Perhaps. The core system should still respond to direct royal commands." She placed her palm against the drone's central processing unit, closing her eyes in concentration. The machine trembled slightly, lights flickering as conflicting directives battled within its ancient circuitry. Finally, it emitted a soft chime. Panels opened along its side, revealing an interface that glowed with symbols. "It's providing access to the maintenance network," Nyrus said, examining the display, "including security feeds from the Sky Temple." They gathered around as the drone projected holographic images above its frame, scenes from various locations within the floating city. Most showed normal activities. Arzan citizens going about their business, maintenance workers tending the energy columns, security forces patrolling elegant corridors. Then, one image froze them all in place. A circular chamber dominated by a massive device that pulsed with silvery blue energy. Strapped to an examination platform was an Arzan male, his once regal features contorted in pain as energy arced across his body. "Father," Nyrus whispered, horror evident in her voice. Beside the platform stood Governess Marathi, her crimson ceremonial armor gleaming in the pulsating light. She observed the torture with clinical detachment, occasionally adjusting controls on a nearby console. "The Divine Hall," Nyrus explained, voice shaking. "Where the ancestral relic is kept. She's using it to extract something from him." "The telepathic connection you've been feeling," Kellen realized. "She's amplifying it somehow." "Using him as bait," Lee concluded grimly. "She knows you can sense him." Nyrus stepped back from the drone, fists clenched. "This changes everything. She doesn't want me dead because of the curse. She wants me captured. The curse is just her public justification." "But why?" Mara asked. "The succession," Nyrus said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Without my father and me, she could place her nephew, not of pure royal blood, on the throne. The bloodline curse gives her the perfect pretext to eliminate us both." Kellen studied the security feeds, mentally mapping the Sky Temple's layout. "We need a new plan. Direct confrontation is suicide with their security forces." "There's another way," Nyrus said, manipulating the drone's interface. "Maintenance access through the energy columns leads to subsystems beneath the Divine Hall. If we can reach the ancestral relic's control mechanisms..." "We could expose the governess's deception," Kellen finished. "And prove the curse is a fabrication," Nyrus added. At least in my case. They spent hours studying the security feeds, identifying patrol patterns and access points. The drone provided detailed schematics of the Sky Temple's infrastructure, revealing vulnerabilities in its seemingly impenetrable defenses. By morning, though time was difficult to track in the eternal twilight of the tunnels, they had formulated their approach. The drone would guide them to the nearest energy column, where they would ascend through maintenance shafts to the temple proper. Once inside, Kellen instructed, we split into 2 teams. Mara leads the engineers to the relic's control systems. Lieutenant Lee and I will accompany Nyrus to the Divine Hall to confront the governess. And if diplomacy fails, Lee asked pointedly. Kellen's expression hardened. Then we adapt. But our primary objective remains securing the safety of both Nyrus and her father, and establishing the truth about this alleged curse. As they prepared to depart, Mara approached Kellen privately. You realize this could be interpreted as direct interference in Arzan internal affairs? The Conquered might view this as violation of the Prime Directive. I'm aware, Kellen acknowledged. But sometimes principles conflict, and we must choose which to uphold. The Conquered was founded on the belief that sentient rights transcend planetary boundaries. Mara studied him thoughtfully. You've changed since we found Nyrus. The old Admiral Thorne might have calculated the diplomatic costs more carefully. The old Admiral Thorne didn't have to watch his crew die protecting a refugee, Kellen replied quietly. Some prices clarify one's priorities. They followed the drone through increasingly narrow tunnels until they reached a massive vertical shaft, one of the energy columns that supported the Sky Temple. Looking up, Kellen could see the column stretching endlessly toward the surface, pulsing with contained power. The maintenance ladders are intact, Nyrus observed, examining ancient rungs embedded in the column's interior. But it's a long climb. How long? Lee asked. Several kilometers, Nyrus admitted. The temple hovers above the dust storms. Kellen examined their supplies. We'll rest here, then begin the ascent. Everyone conserve energy. We'll need it for what comes after. As the team prepared for the climb, Nyrus drew Kellen aside. Admiral, I need to tell you something about the ancestral relic. Her expression was troubled, voice lowered to ensure privacy. The device isn't just a monitor for bloodline purity. According to the oldest legends, it's a key to something buried deep beneath Harael's surface. Something my ancestors locked away during the Great Retraction. What exactly did they lock away? Kellen asked. Nyrus shook her head. The histories are deliberately vague. They speak only of that which came from the stars and the sleeping darkness. But whatever it is, accessing it requires pure royal blood. Blood that hasn't been modified. Modified how? My ancestors engineered certain traits into the royal bloodline. The telepathy, the genetic memory, the silver veins, supposedly to make us better rulers. But perhaps, her voice faltered. Perhaps to make you better keys, Kellen finished grimly. Nyrus nodded. If my mother controls both the relic and a royal bloodline member, she could potentially access whatever is buried beneath the surface. And you think that's her true goal? Not just political power? I don't know, Nyrus admitted. But she's never been one to settle for mere governance when greater power might be attainable. This new information cast their mission in an even more urgent light. As they began the long climb up the energy column, Kellen pondered the implications. What had the ancient Arzan discovered or created that required such elaborate safeguards? And what might happen if Governess Marathi accessed it? The ascent was grueling, the ancient maintenance rungs occasionally crumbling under their weight. Energy pulses within the column created disorienting visual effects, making it seem as if they climbed through flowing liquid rather than air. Hours later, exhausted and aching, they reached a maintenance hatch near the column's upper terminus. According to the drone's schematics, they were now at the base of the Sky Temple proper. Nyrus placed her palm against the hatch's ancient scanner. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hiss, the portal slid open, revealing a narrow access corridor beyond. "We're inside," she whispered, relief evident in her voice. Kellen checked his team, tired but determined, weapons ready. "Remember the plan. Minimal contact with civilians. We're here to expose a deception, not start a war." As they moved through the service corridors of the Sky Temple, Kellen was struck by the contrast between the ancient infrastructure and the elegant beauty of the main chambers, glimpsed through maintenance gratings. The Arzan had built their floating city with both function and aesthetic in mind. Curved archways supporting critical structural elements, luminescent panels providing both light and artistic display. They navigated by memory, following the path planned from the drone's schematics. Occasionally, they froze as security patrols passed nearby, their elaborate armor clinking softly against the polished floors. "The control system should be through here," Mara whispered as they reached a junction. Kellen nodded. "Proceed as planned. We'll rendezvous at the Divine Hall in 1 hour." As Mara led her team down one corridor, Kellen, Lee, and Nyrus continued toward the heart of the temple. The passages grew grander, the ceilings higher, indicating their approach to the ceremonial sectors. "Security will be heaviest around the Divine Hall," Nyrus warned. "And the relic itself may have defenses we can't anticipate." "We'll adapt," Kellen assured her. "One way or another, we'll reveal the truth." They were nearing their destination when alarm klaxons suddenly blared throughout the temple. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in crimson, and security announcements echoed in the Arzan language. "They've detected us," Lee said, weapon raised. Nyrus listened to the announcements, her expression darkening. "Worse, they're announcing that terrorists have infiltrated the temple, humans working with a corrupted royal—" "Your mother is preparing the public for our appearance," Kellen realized, "framing us before we can speak." "We need to hurry," Nyrus urged. "Once she controls the narrative completely, no one will listen." They abandoned stealth for speed, racing through increasingly ornate corridors toward the Divine Hall. Twice they encountered security teams, forced to disable them with stun settings before they could raise further alarm. Finally, they reached an antechamber decorated with elaborate murals depicting Arzan history, the Ascension, the Great Retraction, the establishment of the Sky Temples. At the far end, massive doors of iridescent metal marked the entrance to the Divine Hall itself. "Those doors require royal authorization," Nyrus said, approaching cautiously. "Will they recognize you, given the curse?" Kellen asked. "They should. The curse is political, not technological." She placed her palm against the scanning panel beside the doors. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep, resonant tone, the massive doors began to part. Beyond lay the circular chamber they had glimpsed through the drone's security feed. The ancestral relic dominated the center, a towering construct of metal and crystal that pulsed with silvery blue energy. Attached to it was the Emperor, his once proud form now frail and diminished, silver veins darkened with stress and pain. And before it all stood Governess Marathi, resplendent in ceremonial armor, flanked by elite guards. Her cold eyes registered no surprise at their entrance, only calculation and the faintest hint of satisfaction. "My wayward daughter returns," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "and brings alien contamination into our most sacred chamber." Nyrus stepped forward, head high despite her exhaustion. "I bring truth, Mother, the truth you've tried to bury beneath lies and false curses." "The Bloodline curse is our most sacred tradition," Marathi replied smoothly. "A protection against corruption that has preserved our civilization for millennia." "A protection twisted into a political weapon," Nyrus countered. "You declared me cursed, not because I violated tradition, but because I stood between you and control of the throne." Marathi's expression remained impassive, but her eyes hardened. Such accusations from one whose veins should already run black with corruption. Perhaps your human allies have somehow delayed the inevitable. Or perhaps, Kellen interjected, stepping forward. The curse only manifests when you activate it deliberately, a technological tool disguised as mystical judgment. The governess turned her cold gaze to Kellen. Humans, always reducing the sublime to the mechanical. You understand nothing of our traditions, our necessities. I understand using fear to control populations, Kellen replied evenly. I understand fabricating divine judgment to eliminate political rivals. A thin smile curved Marathi's lips. Is that what you believe this is? Mere politics? She gestured toward the emperor. My consort believed as you do, that our sacred traditions were outdated, that we should open ourselves to outside influences. Her voice hardened. He failed to understand the responsibility we bear. Responsibility for what? Nyrus demanded. For keeping it contained, Marathi hissed, all pretense of calm slipping. The thing our ancestors discovered orbiting the dead moon, the thing they brought back, studied, and then realized they could never control. Kellen felt a chill despite the chamber's warmth. What exactly did they bring back? A fragment of something ancient and vast, Marathi replied. Something that reached into their minds and showed them possibilities, technologies beyond imagination, power beyond measure. Her eyes gleamed with fervor. But it required sacrifice, genetic modification, bloodline alteration. Some embraced these changes, becoming the first royal line. Others rejected them, fearing what we might become. The Great Retraction, Nyrus whispered. It wasn't about a natural cataclysm at all. It was about containment, Marathi confirmed. The modified bloodline could communicate with the entity, could access its knowledge, but also risked being influenced by it. The ancestral relic was built as both key and barrier, allowing controlled access while preventing full awakening. And the curse, Kellen asked. A necessary safeguard. Any royal whose mind became too susceptible to the entity's influence would be eliminated. For millennia, the system worked perfectly. Her expression darkened as she looked at Nyrus. Until your father began questioning our traditions, suggesting we dismantle the safeguards for the sake of progress. Nyrus looked at her father, understanding dawning. You're not torturing him for political control. You're extracting something from his mind. The access codes, Marathi confirmed. The mental keys passed from ruler to heir. With them, I can strengthen the containment rather than weaken it, ensure the entity remains sealed for another 1,000 years. At the cost of how many lives? Kellen challenged. How many cursed royals have you eliminated to maintain your control? As many as necessary, Marathi replied without hesitation. Individual lives mean nothing compared to the safety of our civilization, of all civilizations. If the entity fully awakens. A sudden tremor shook the divine hall, interrupting her. Crystal components of the ancestral relic chimed discordantly as power fluctuations rippled through the structure. What have you done? Marathi demanded, suddenly alarmed. A voice came through Kellen's communicator, Mara Delgado's. Admiral, we've accessed the control systems. The relic's power regulation is destabilizing. There's some kind of feedback loop we can't contain. Another, stronger tremor shook the chamber. The Emperor stirred on his platform, eyes opening with newfound clarity. Nyrus, he called weakly. The resonance, it's breaking through. The ancestral relics pulsing intensified, the silvery blue energy darkening to indigo. The crystal components began to crack, hairline fractures spreading across their surfaces. Stop this immediately, Marathi commanded, genuine fear now evident in her voice. You have no idea what you're unleashing. Lieutenant Lee moved to a control panel, attempting to stabilize the systems. Something's overriding our commands. The power surge is coming from below, from beneath the surface. Nyrus rushed to her father's side, working to free him from the restraints. "Father, what's happening?" "The containment. Weakening," he gasped. "The entity senses freedom." Kellen joined them, helping disconnect the Emperor from the machine. "How do we stop it?" "The purity beacon," the Emperor whispered, pointing to a smaller device near the relic. "It can reset the containment fields, but requires royal blood, untainted." Marathi moved toward them, her earlier hostility replaced by urgent cooperation. "He speaks of the emergency protocol, but it requires a royal whose mind hasn't been compromised by the entity. And you've declared every royal besides yourself corrupted," Kellen observed grimly. "Because they were," Marathi insisted. "I felt the influence growing in them, the subtle whispers, the changing priorities. Even my consort began to speak of releasing constraints and embracing transformation." Another violent tremor shook the chamber. Cracks appeared in the ornate floor, revealing pulsing energy beneath. "We're running out of time," Lee warned. "Whatever's down there is waking up." Nerys looked from her father to the purity beacon, determination hardening her features. "I'll do it, daughter." "No," the Emperor protested weakly. "If your mind has been touched by the entity, the beacon will destroy you." "If I've been corrupted, then Mother was right all along," Nerys replied. "But if not, if the curse was just her political weapon, then I can reset the containment and expose the lie." Kellen grabbed her arm. "Nerys, wait! There has to be another way." She met his gaze. Azure eyes calm despite the chaos around them. "This is why you saved me, Admiral. Not just for justice, but for this moment. One life to protect many. Isn't that the principle you'd uphold?" Before he could respond, she pulled away, moving purposefully toward the purity beacon. The device hummed with potential energy, its crystalline core glowing with the same silvery blue as the relic. "Stop her!" Marathi ordered her guards, but they hesitated, uncertain amidst the escalating crisis. Nerys placed her hands on the beacon's interface, gasping as energy flowed into her. The silver veins beneath her skin illuminated brilliantly, tracing patterns across her body like rivers of light. For a terrible moment, Kellen feared the worst, that the device would judge her corrupted and destroy her. Instead, the beacon's light intensified, shifting from blue to pure white. The energy flowed from Nerys into the floor, following the cracks until they reached the ancestral relic. The relic's ominous indigo glow receded, returning to its original silvery blue. The tremors subsided gradually, and the cracks in the floor sealed themselves as the energy recirculated. When the process completed, Nerys stood transformed, not destroyed, but illuminated from within. The silver veins beneath her skin pulsed once more with healthy light before fading to their normal state. "Impossible," Marathi whispered. "You should have been corrupted. The entity should have influenced you." "Perhaps," the Emperor said, his strength returning as the crisis abated. "Our daughter possesses something the entity cannot corrupt, something you forgot in your obsession with control." "What would that be?" Marathi demanded. "Compassion," Kellen suggested. "Willingness to sacrifice for others, rather than sacrifice others for power." Nerys stepped away from the beacon, approaching her mother with newfound authority. "The purity beacon has judged me uncorrupted. Mother, your curse was a fabrication, a tool to eliminate those who threatened your control." "You don't understand," Marathi insisted, though her voice had lost its conviction. "The containment must be maintained. The entity must remain sealed." "And it will be," Nerys assured her, "but not through fear and execution, not through lies disguised as tradition." The doors to the Divine Hall opened as Mara and her team arrived, accompanied by several high-ranking Arzan officials who had responded to the crisis. "The temple systems are stabilizing," Mara reported. "But we found something interesting in the archives, records of previous cursed royals, all of whom opposed the governess's policies." The Arzan officials looked to Marathi with growing suspicion, then to Nyrus and the Emperor, noting their uncorrupted state despite the governess's proclamations. The bloodline curse was real once, the Emperor explained wearily. A necessary safeguard against the entity's influence. But in recent generations, it became a political weapon, activated not by corruption, but by command. The governess has deceived us, one official declared. Used sacred tradition to eliminate rivals. As the implications spread through the chamber, Marathi's authority visibly diminished. Royal guards who had moments ago obeyed her without question now looked to Nyrus and the Emperor for guidance. Take the governess into custody, the Emperor ordered. She will answer for her actions before the full council. As guards led Marathi away, her final glance at Nyrus contained not hatred, but something more complex, perhaps a grudging respect, or recognition of a strength she had underestimated. In the aftermath, as temple systems were secured and explanations provided to bewildered officials, Kellen found himself standing with Nyrus on a balcony, overlooking the crimson wastes far below. The setting suns painted the desert in hues of amber and gold, transforming the harsh landscape into something almost beautiful. "Your father will recover?" Kellen asked. Nyrus nodded. "The relic did no permanent damage. He'll resume leadership while I—" She paused, considering. "While I help reform our approach to the entity, balance containment with understanding." "And the curse?" "A relic of the past," she said firmly. "We'll maintain the necessary safeguards without the politics of fear. The purity beacon can detect genuine corruption without execution." Kellen gazed out at the horizon, where the distant wreckage of the Terra Nova lay almost invisible in the vastness of the desert. "My crew paid a high price for this resolution. Their sacrifice prevented something far worse," Nyrus said softly. "If the entity had awakened fully, its influence can spread across worlds, subtle at first, then overwhelming. Your Concord might have faced an enemy unlike any you've encountered." "Will you tell them?" Kellen asked. "The Concord. I mean, about what lies beneath Hariel's surface?" Nyrus considered this. "Some truths are burdens, Admiral. Perhaps in time, when relations between our peoples have deepened. For now, let them believe this was merely internal politics." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken eventually by Lieutenant Lee's approach. "Admiral, repairs on the emergency shuttle are complete. We can reach orbit and signal the Concord for extraction." Kellen nodded. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Prepare for departure." As Lee withdrew, Nyrus turned to face Kellen fully. "You're leaving, then?" "I must report to my superiors," he replied. "Explain my actions. Face whatever consequences they deem appropriate." "Will they understand why you intervened in our affairs?" Kellen smiled slightly. "Some will. Others will cite regulations and protocols. But I stand by the decision." "Because you saved a life?" Nyrus asked. "Because I upheld a principle worth defending," Kellen replied. "That justice and compassion transcend boundaries, planetary, political, or biological." Nyrus studied him, her azure eyes reflecting the sunset's glow. "You humans are remarkable creatures, so physically fragile compared to many species, yet so unyielding in your convictions." "It's how we've survived," Kellen said. "Not through superior strength or technology, but through cooperation and shared principles." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the desert below. Nyrus turned toward the horizon, where the 3 moons of Harael were beginning their ascent. "The Council has requested that I serve as liaison to your interstellar Concord," she said, after a moment, "to establish formal diplomatic relations between our peoples." Kellen raised an eyebrow. "A significant responsibility. One I wouldn't have been offered if not for you," she acknowledged. "When you refused to leave me behind, you changed not just my fate, but potentially the relationship between our civilizations." Their conversation was interrupted by Mara's arrival, her expression serious, but no longer strained. "Admiral, the Emperor requests your presence before departure. A formal acknowledgement of our assistance." Kellen nodded. "Tell him I'll be there shortly." When Mara had gone, Nyrus touched Kellen's arm briefly, a gesture of intimacy rare among the formal Arzan. "Whatever consequences you face from your concord, know that the royal house of Arzan stands with you. You have allies here now." "I appreciate that," Kellen replied sincerely. "Though I hope our next meeting involves fewer life-threatening situations." A smile touched her lips. "As do I, Admiral Thorne." The formal acknowledgement proved to be more than Kellen had anticipated. In the grand chamber of the Sky Temple, before assembled Arzan dignitaries, the Emperor, still weakened but regally composed, officially recognized the valiant intervention of interstellar Concord representatives in preventing a grave internal threat. The careful wording maintained Arzan dignity while acknowledging the human contribution. More significantly, the Emperor announced the establishment of a permanent Arzan embassy within Concord space, with Princess Nyrus as chief envoy. "The old ways change slowly," the Emperor stated, his voice carrying surprising strength. "But change they must, if we are to find our rightful place among the stars once more." As Kellen and his remaining crew prepared to depart, rumors already circulated among the Arzan populace, whispers of the entity beneath the surface, of the true nature of the Bloodline curse, of royal sacrifices justified as tradition. Such deep-rooted beliefs would take generations to transform completely, but the process had begun. The repaired shuttle lifted from the Sky Temple docking platform as night fell over Harael. Through the viewport, Kellen watched the floating city recede, its illuminated spires like a constellation against the darkening sky. "Do you think the Concord will understand what happened here?" Mara asked, as they achieved stable orbit. "They'll understand the diplomatic breakthrough," Kellen replied. "The rest, perhaps it's better left in classified reports for now." Lieutenant Lee, monitoring communications, suddenly straightened. "Admiral, incoming transmission from a Concord vessel. The Damascus has responded to our emergency beacon." Within hours, they were aboard the Damascus, a Concord diplomatic cruiser that had been searching for the Terra Nova since communication was lost. The ship's commander, Captain Reynolds, received Kellen's preliminary report with appropriate gravity. "The Admiralty will want a full accounting, Thorne," Reynolds warned privately. "Interference in planetary affairs, loss of a survey vessel, casualties. I'm prepared to face whatever review board they convene." Kellen responded evenly. "My actions were necessary and justified under the circumstances." Reynolds studied him thoughtfully. "For what it's worth, establishing diplomatic relations with the Arzan has been a Concord priority for years. Whatever reprimand comes your way will likely be balanced against that achievement." As the Damascus prepared for the jump back to Concord space, Kellen found himself in the observation lounge, gazing at Harael's red sphere below. The planet's mysteries remained largely intact, the entity contained, the ancient technologies only partially understood. Perhaps that was for the best, at least for now. He thought of Nyrus, standing on that temple balcony, her eyes reflecting both the burden of her heritage and the possibility of a new beginning. Their paths would cross again, he was certain, two representatives of vastly different civilizations, connected by shared experience and mutual respect. The planet began to shrink as the Damascus moved toward jump coordinates. Kellen watched until Harael was merely a crimson dot against the blackness, carrying its secrets and its promise into an uncertain future. 3 months later, Kellen stood before the Concord Review Board. The formal inquiry into the Terra Nova incident finally concluded. The 7 admirals regarded him with expressions ranging from stern disapproval to veiled admiration. "Admiral Thorne," the lead official began. This board has reviewed your actions regarding the Arzan royal succession crisis and the subsequent loss of the Terra Nova. While we acknowledge the violation of non-interference protocols, we also recognize the exceptional circumstances and the diplomatic breakthrough that resulted. Kellen stood at attention, his new uniform still stiff across the shoulders. He had spent the intervening months providing detailed reports, answering endless questions, and occasionally wondering if his career was effectively over. Therefore, it is the judgment of this board that you be reinstated to active duty with the following provision. You will serve as Concord liaison to the new Arzan embassy, facilitating the integration of their delegation into Concord diplomatic structures. The announcement took Kellen by surprise. Not a punishment, but a continuation of the work he had begun on Harail. "Thank you, Admiral," he responded formally. "I accept the assignment." Later, as he left the Concord headquarters in New Geneva, Kellen found Vice Admiral Delgado waiting for him on the broad steps overlooking Lake Lehman. "So, not court-martialed after all," Mara observed with a hint of a smile. "Apparently not," Kellen agreed. "And you? Recovery proceeding well?" Mara nodded, unconsciously touching the regenerated tissue along her jawline, where Harail's unforgiving environment had left its mark. "Physical wounds heal. The others take longer." They walked in companionable silence along the lakeshore, the setting sun gilding the water's surface. "I've been assigned to the Arzan embassy," Kellen finally said. "Diplomatic liaison." "I heard," Mara replied. "Princess Nyrus arrives next week to establish the mission. Rumor has it she specifically requested you as her Concord counterpart." Kellen allowed himself a small smile. "Did she now?" "Something about shared principles and mutual understanding." Mara glanced at him sideways. "She made quite an impression on you." "As did we on her. I think—" Kellen paused, watching a flock of birds trace patterns against the sky. "The Arzan have isolated themselves for centuries. Mara, their emergence into the wider community could transform the balance of power in this sector." "And the entity beneath their planet? The one they've contained for millennia?" Kellen's expression grew serious. "Classified at the highest level. The Concord leadership has been briefed, but public knowledge would only create panic. For now, we trust the Arzan to maintain their containment systems. And if they fail, then we face a threat unlike any in Concord history," Kellen admitted. "But not alone. That's the point of alliances, after all. Shared strength against common dangers." The following week, Kellen stood on the observation deck of Concord Station Alpha, watching the Arzan diplomatic vessel make its final approach. The sleek craft bore little resemblance to traditional Arzan design, incorporating elements clearly inspired by Concord technology, a visible symbol of the cultural exchange already beginning. As the official welcoming committee assembled in the docking bay, Kellen found himself reflecting on the strange path that had brought him here. One impulsive decision on Oral Station, to protect rather than abandon, had cascaded into consequences no one could have predicted. The Arzan vessel docked with characteristic precision. Formal announcements echoed through the station as airlocks cycled and diplomatic protocols initiated. When the delegation finally emerged, Princess Nyrus led them, regal in traditional Arzan ceremonial attire, modified to incorporate symbols of her new role as ambassador. Her eyes found Kellen immediately among the assembled officials. Though her expression remained appropriately formal, he could see the recognition there, the shared memory of desert crossings, ancient tunnels, and revelations that had transformed them both. Later, after the official ceremonies concluded, they found a moment of privacy in the diplomatic quarters garden chamber. Artificial though it was, the space captured something of Earth's natural beauty: flowing water, growing things, dappled light. "Ambassador Nyrus," Kellen said formally, then relaxed into a smile. "It's good to see you again." "Liaison Admiral Thorne," she replied with equal formality, before allowing her own smile. The feeling is mutual. How fares Harel? He asked. Changing, she answered simply. The revelation of my mother's manipulations has sparked a cultural reassessment. Many traditions are being questioned, many assumptions challenged. And the containment systems? Nyrus's expression grew serious. Secured and improved. My father has dedicated significant resources to enhancing the barriers. What sleeps beneath Harel will continue to sleep. They walked among the cultivated plants, Nyrus examining earth species with curious fingers. Your world is so vital, she observed. So filled with life. Harel was once similar, the histories say. Perhaps it could be again, Kellen suggested. Terraforming technology has advanced considerably in recent decades. A discussion for future diplomatic sessions, Nyrus said, though her eyes brightened at the possibility. For now, we focus on more immediate concerns. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, security protocols. The foundations of lasting alliance, Kellen agreed. They paused beside a small reflecting pool where earth fish darted among submerged plants. Nyrus watched them with fascination before speaking again. Do you ever regret it, Admiral? Your decision on Oral Station? Kellen considered the question seriously. I regret the lives lost. I regret the destruction of the Terra Nova. But helping you. He shook his head. Never. Even knowing what was at stake? What still lies beneath Harel's surface? Especially knowing that, Kellen replied, some burdens are too great for any civilization to bear alone. Nyrus nodded slowly. When I fled through Oral Station that day, desperate and certain of my impending execution, I could not have imagined where that path would lead. Don't leave me here, human. I begged you. Her azure eyes met his. You didn't leave me then, and it seems the universe has arranged that we not leave each other's orbits, even now. A fortunate arrangement, Kellen observed. For both our peoples. Beyond the garden chamber's transparent dome, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the blackness of space, a reminder of what they fought to protect, what alliances ultimately served. And somewhere distant, Harel continued its ancient vigil, a red sentinel guarding secrets that might one day demand the attention of all civilized worlds. But for now, in this moment of hard-won peace, a human admiral and an alien princess, each forever changed by their shared journey, stood together at the threshold of a new chapter in interstellar relations. Not as adversaries or strangers, but as allies who had faced darkness together and emerged into light. The ancient entity beneath Harel's surface slumbered on, contained by technologies beyond current understanding. But if it should ever stir again, it would face not an isolated civilization guarding ancient secrets, but a united front of diverse species standing together against the darkness. That, Kellen reflected, was the true victory they had won in the Crimson Wastes. Not merely survival, but the promise of shared strength in the challenges to come. Two unlikely friendships, he said, offering a traditional Concord gesture of respect. Nyrus responded with the corresponding Arzan motion, her silver-white hair catching the light as she moved. And to the principles worth upholding, even when the cost seems too high. Around them, the diplomatic station hummed with activity as representatives from a dozen worlds conducted the business of interstellar governance. A new voice would now join that chorus, the ancient wisdom of Arzan, blending with the diverse perspectives of the Concord. All because, in a moment of crisis, a human admiral had refused to abandon an alien princess hunted for her bloodline. Some choices, it seemed, truly did echo across the stars.